Started. Thank you. So before we begin, just want to go over some housekeeping items. So the session is being recorded. It will be shared on our on-demand webinars page, isac.org/pd/on-demand webinars. If you're having trouble connecting audio through your computer, or if one of your colleagues is and they're texting you, let them know that they can use the call me option for audio. They would just have to go to the audio settings and use the call me option. It'll call them on their phone so they can hear us on their phone while they're seeing us on their screens. If you have any questions today, you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature to ask questions. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of the WebEx platform. So it has a little question mark. If you don't see it pop up automatically, there's also the 3 dots at the bottom right-hand corner, and you should see the Q&A. And if you are interested in any of our other upcoming webinars, you can find them on our PD/webinars page. And we will also be having continuing education credits and professional development hours, and they will be available for this webinar. Okay, so let's begin by just discussing a little bit about ISAC before we get into the content today. So ISAC is the state's financial aid agency, and we administer scholarships and grants to students across the state of Illinois who decide to stay in Illinois for their education, post-secondary education. Also, our mission statement is providing Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. And also, I'm on the professional development team, as is Anna and some of our other colleagues that are on the call today. And we provide professional development offerings on things like navigating the financial aid process, right? This FAFSA Line-by-Line that y'all are joining today, resources and support options for underrepresented students. We have one of those presentations actually coming up on 2/13. And other topics, understanding the student loan repayment and forgiveness programs and all of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is our agenda for today. So we're going to start off by moving through the form as a dependent student. We're going to start off with their identity and demographics section. Then we'll move to dependent student financials. Then I will pass it off to Anna to go over parent identity and demographics, and then the parent financial section. So let's get into it. Okay. So dependent student identity and demographics. So this is what the FAFSA landing page looks like. So when you are helping your students, this is what it's going to look like. So for the 24-25 FAFSA form, they can either select start a new form if they have not started one already, or edit existing form if you are coming in, helping a student, and they're like, yeah, I've already started it, but I just need a little bit of help, just making sure that you click the right one. So this is what the student login page looks like. It looks the same for both student and parent. It just asks for that email, phone, or FSA ID username, and then their password. And then once they put that in, they can go ahead and log in. If somebody does not have an FSA ID account, aka they don't have their username and password set up, you can also, at the bottom of the page, create an account if that needs to be done. Okay, so for this year's FAFSA, the main difference is that it is a role-based form. So essentially, students will be completing their student section and parents will be completing their corresponding parent section. So we're going to talk about how those roles play into completing the FAFSA and how it'll look like for students to log in. And then Anna will discuss what it looks like for a parent to log in as well, and how the student invites the parent. So this is what it's going to look like when a student logs in for the first time. So if they are the student, they would just go ahead and select, I am starting the FAFSA form as a student. Just a quick note, parents can also start the application as well. Just make sure if it is a parent that is starting it, that they select parent instead. Okay, so there are 4 pages of the student and parent onboarding with videos and also just explanations of the free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA. So the very first onboarding page looks like this with a video that you can also watch on YouTube if you are interested to see what the video entails. But this video is really just explaining, what the FAFSA is, why it's important, what you're applying to when you apply for the FAFSA, just so that students and parents can get that background before they go into the form. Then for the second onboarding page, it discusses the contributors to the FAFSA form and what that looks like, who is considered a contributor for the FAFSA form. Again, it's in a video format, but also they decided to put text there as well for somebody who would rather read it. So parents and or the student's spouse would be a contributor to their FAFSA. And then it also discusses how to invite a parent or a spouse to the FAFSA as well. So the third page is just what to expect. So just letting them know that every contributor has to provide consent and approval to be eligible for federal student aid. And what that means is they need consent and approval so that they can obtain their federal tax information directly from the IRS to help them complete the FAFSA. So the IRS would then import all of their financial information. So just making sure that students and parents make sure to sign that consent for approval to make this process easier for them. And finally, the fourth page of the onboarding just explains what happens after submitting the FAFSA form. So just letting them know that the schools they selected will receive their FAFSA eligibility. They'll receive their student aid index. Right now in this screenshot, it does say in late January, but we did just get word last week that institutional student information records or ISRs are not going to be sent out until March, early March. So just making sure that y'all are aware of that as well, that ISRs are further delayed until March and not January. But the ISRs will be hopefully processed by early March. And then once that happens, that they will receive an email when their student aid index is available and their FAFSA submission summary is available as well. And then the schools that they put on their FAFSA, they will then create a financial aid offer that explains the different types of financial aid that they are eligible for, as well as the different amounts. And then once they start receiving all of the financial aid offers, then they would just have to go through all of the financial aid offers to see which option is the most financially responsible for them. Okay, so we're moving forward in the student identity information. So most of the student identity information is just going to be pre-populated from their FSA ID. As a reminder, the FSA ID is the account for FSA's website just in general. So it encompasses the FAFSA, but it also encompasses other things like checking in on your student loans, just an example. So when you sign up for an FSA ID, you already put all of your identity information. So your date of birth, your social security number, your email address, your phone number. There may be some things that may need to be edited. I'm just letting you know that if it's something like the social security number, you notice that it's wrong, or the date of birth, you notice that it's wrong, it is easier and better to go to the FSA ID account first and change it there before trying to move forward with the FAFSA, especially if you see something that's incorrect, because once you change it in the account, it'll reflect on the FAFSA as well. So just making sure that the student and family, especially, for parents who maybe they've moved or they haven't used their FSA ID in years, right? Just making sure that everybody's account is up to date as well with their new address, checking to make sure their social security number is correct and their FSA ID has been matched, all of that good stuff before entering the FAFSA. So moving forward in student identity information, so it asks for the permanent mailing address, the city, state, zip code, and country. Most of this will also be pre-populated as well, but just in case it is editable in case they need to make any changes to that. So then it asks the student state of legal residency. So I just want to make sure that students and parents that they know that it's not necessarily asking them for their like, how would you say it? For their I don't know why my mind is like, it just escaped me, but it's not asking for their
Immigration status.
immigration status. Thank you, Anna. It's not asking for their immigration status. It really, all it's asking is, where is your fixed and permanent home? So if it's in Illinois, for example, they would put Illinois, and then the date that the student became that legal resident, right? So then they would just put the date. If they were born there, they would just put the month and year that they were born. Thank you, Anna. I don't know why that word just escaped me. Okay, so moving forward for student consent and approval. So this is the consent and approval I was talking about earlier. So something new this year is that there is a direct data exchange with the IRS, so that students and parents' tax information can be directly imported into the FAFSA. So it's a little bit different than what was used in previous years. Now it's going to be more of that direct import rather than going into the IRS site, putting in all your information, waiting to see if it finds it, all of that. This is all going to be automatic and make it a lot easier for students and parents to complete the form. Just something to note about this is that students must give consent. They have to, students and parents, trust that it'll make the process easier, but also if they don't give consent, the student's SAI will not be calculated. The student will be ineligible for federal financial aid, and they will be required to report tax information manually. So just making sure that they provide that consent so that they can avoid, being ineligible for federal student aid, reporting their tax information manually, right? Making this a longer process than it needs to be. So moving forward to students' personal circumstances. So this just asks the student a couple of questions just to determine their eligibility for federal student aid. And also based on these answers, it'll just affect the types of federal student aid that you're eligible to receive. For example, if you're a dependent or an independent student, or if you're in your undergrad versus your master's. So let's go through those questions. So the student marital status, just making sure that the student, is really diligent about reading, that this is for the student and it's not asking for the parent. So, if you're working with high school students, most of them are not married. Some of them may be, but if they're single, just go ahead and click single and then continue. College and career plans. So this question asks, when the student begins their 24-25 school year, what would their college grade level be? So if you're working with seniors, most often it's going to be first year freshmen. Just letting them know too that even if they have dual credit or dual enrollment, for financial aid purposes, they are still going to be considered that first year freshman, because if they have not received any, financial aid or anything like that, that's why they still count as that first year freshman, because there are loan limits and all of that good stuff when it comes to what grade you're in school and how old you are as well. Then the next question asks, when the student begins their 24-25 school year, will they have their first bachelor's degree? They'll just click yes or no. Obviously, if they're in high school and they're looking to get their bachelor's, they do not have it yet. So, okay, so moving on to personal circumstances. So this question asks the 13 dependency questions, that at least that's what it used to be called. Now it's just called personal circumstances. So based on these questions, it's going to determine whether the student is a dependent, aka they need parent information on the FAFSA, or an independent student. They will not need parent information on the FAFSA. So let's go through those questions. So the first question asks if the student is currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training. So if the student is able to select yes to that question, they would go ahead and click that box. The next question asks if the student is a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. So for that question as well, honestly, both of these questions, sometimes the students get mixed up and they're like, oh, what if my dad is a veteran, or what if my mom is a veteran? Does that count? This is asking for the students themselves, so just making sure that they are answering for themselves only. The next question, it asks, at any time since a student turned the age of 13, were they an orphan with no biological or living or adoptive parent? If they are in this circumstance, at any time since they turned the age of 13, if they were an orphan or a ward of the court, even if, that doesn't apply to them today, maybe they're 18, they aged out of being a ward of the court, right, or something like that. If it's at any time since they turned the age of 13, even if it's no longer their case today, they should be selecting yes to this question, so just letting them know. The next question then goes on to ask, at any time since they turned the age of 13, were they the ward of the court or were they in foster care? So all of these, I kind of just did all the questions at once, so I'm sorry about that. But if they were ward of the court, they were in foster care, or they were an orphan at any point since they turned the age of 13, even if it is no longer the case, they should be answering yes to this question. Then it asks, is the student a legally emancipated minor as determined by a court in their state of legal residence? So for this question, essentially emancipation is legal divorce from your parents. So, sometimes we get questions from students like, how do I know if I'm emancipated? They would know. More often than not, it is a pretty long legal process where they would need to talk to lawyers and all of those, types of things, go to court, court dates, all of that. So, if they don't know, they probably are not emancipated. You could also just ask them, do you, live at home with your parents and you're, still under their care? Then the answer to this question would be no. The next question asks, is the student in a legal guardianship with someone other than their parent or step-parent as determined by a court in their state of residence? So for this question, we get some confusion sometimes with what legal guardianship means and what it means to get it determined by a court in their state of legal residence. So in order to answer yes to this question, the student needs to make sure that the legal guardianship is someone other than their parent or step-parent, as it says, and it needs to be as determined by a court in their state of residence at the time that the court's decision was issued. So even if it's not in Illinois, maybe they lived in a different state at the time, that doesn't really matter. It just needs to be the court that they live in, the state that they lived in at the time. And also it needs to be court appointed, right? So sometimes we have students that say, I have a legal guardian, but it's more so, for school purposes, like this is the person that the school contacts on behalf of me, but we've never gone through a court or anything like that. Or maybe that guardian says, we've never gone through a court, we don't have that paperwork. If that is the case, they wouldn't be selecting yes to this question. There would be usually, if the student can still have contact with their parents, they would need to get that parent's information. But if not, and they don't have contact with the parents at all, for other reasons, we'll go into that as well. This may be a situation where the student could potentially be unaccompanied and experiencing homelessness. So it really just depends on your instinct with what the student is experiencing in that situation. Sometimes they're able to get that unaccompanied and homeless designation, but other times if they are still able to contact their parents, let's say maybe they're in another country, just make sure that that's the route that the student goes if they do still have that relationship with their parent. If none of them apply, then they're going to go ahead and hit none of these apply to me. So there are other circumstances as well. So at any time on or after July 1st, 2023, was the student unaccompanied and either homeless and self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So for this question, it is asking, is the student not in the legal custody of their parents, and are they homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So they do need to meet both of those definitions, unaccompanied and homeless. So with this, typically that means they could be, in shelters, they could be living in cars, right? It also, at least in my experience, more often than not, has been students that are couch surfing. Maybe they live with one friend for a period of time and then they move to another place where they're living with another friend or a family member, right? So if that is the case, and they are selecting yes to this question because they're not in that custody of their parent, just making sure that the student has the proper connections to be able to get that determination under the McKinney-Vento law. So there are a couple of people that can give that designation. So then it asks, did any of the following determine the student was homeless and at risk of being homeless? So in this list, we have director or designee of an emergency or transitional shelter, street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, or another program serving those experiencing homelessness. More often than not, we see that the student's high school or school district homeless liaison would be that, first point of contact, especially if they're still in high school. Another person that can give that designation is a director or designee of a project supported by the federal TRIO or Gear Up grant. So this was added this year. And then finally, the financial aid administrator can also give this determination to students. They just didn't necessarily broadcast this before, but now that it is on the FAFSA, we are able to state it that the financial aid administrator is also able to give that determinations to students, in the cases where they are unable to reach out to any of those other options. Okay, so moving forward, let's say the student goes through all of those questions and they are, not able to say yes to any of them, right? So that would mean, you're a dependent student, right? What about, those students that have, other types of situations where they would not be able to get their parent info? So let's talk about that. That's on this slide. It's called unusual circumstances this year. So the student will see this. They'll see, do any of these unusual circumstances prevent the student from contacting their parents, or maybe contacting them would pose a risk to the student? So let's go through those circumstances. So first is maybe the student left home due to an abusive or threatening environment. If that's the case, with these types of situations, the financial aid administrator would ask for some sort of supporting documentation for this. A lot of the times it could be letters of support. For this situation specifically, if the student happens to have any police reports, that could help as well. Let's say the student has been estranged or abandoned from their parents and have not yet been adopted. Maybe they're living with grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle. It's not their legal guardian, right? But they've been abandoned. In this case, those letters of support could work as well. Like, hey, we have not seen so-and-so's parents for 10 years or whatever the case may be. Like, none of us can contact them. We have no idea where they are. So something like that could help and count as supporting documentation. The next one has been granted refugee or asylum status and are separated from their parents, or their parents are displaced in a foreign country. The next one is if the student was a victim of human trafficking. Then it says if the student's been incarcerated or their parents are incarcerated and contact with them would pose a risk, or otherwise unable to contact or locate their parents and have not been adopted. So again, in any of these circumstances, the financial aid office would then follow up. They would need to verify the student and get some sort of supporting documentation for this in order to get that what we call a dependency override, so that they no longer are a dependent student, they can move forward as an independent student. Okay, so every person is going to, oh, JK, this is another screenshot. Sorry about that. So for this screenshot, this is for students that are able to answer yes to one of those unusual circumstances. And if they answer yes to one of those unusual circumstances, they will see this. They will be counted as a provisionally independent student. So what that means is, based on their answers, they would be able to apply as an independent student. They would be able to get their, they would be able to get their FAFSA submission summary and all of that. So in order to complete their application, what they'll need to do is contact the student's financial aid office and provide documentation to verify their circumstances, right? So just making sure to turn in what they need to turn in. Once they're able to verify their circumstances with the financial aid office, then the financial aid office will be able to provide an estimate of the federal student aid eligibility for that student as an independent student. So with all that being said, let's say a student answers no to all the dependency questions. They don't have an unusual circumstance, right? But they still have parents that are like, hey, we're not gonna, give you any information. We're not gonna help you with this application, for whatever reason. There's so many reasons that parents give. But if that is the case, and a student is not, an independent student, they're a dependent student, and their parents are just unwilling to give the information, they do have an option to apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only. So with this question has tripped up quite a few students, I will say, if they're not reading it very carefully. If they just see the question, they're like, yeah, I want to apply for a direct unsubsidized loan. Yes. And they click yes and go and continue, right? This is only for students in that situation where they absolutely, their parents are refusing to help them on the application, just letting them know that they can apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only with no parent information. Otherwise, they would be ineligible for federal student aid. So that, again, this is the option for students whose parents are unwilling to provide the information, but are otherwise a dependent student. Okay, so let's go over who is a parent for financial aid purposes really quick as a recap. So biological parents, adoptive parents, and step parents if they're married to a biological or adoptive parent. If both parents, whether that be biological or adoptive, are unmarried, but they still live together, just making sure that they know that they have to report information for both of those parents. So let me explain to you why. So with the direct data exchange, um, only one tax return can be imported at one time. So let's say there's two parents, they're unmarried, but they've been living together forever, right? And they're still like together, just not legally married. If only one parent does the form, then only their tax returns would come in to the form. But if there's two-parent household, right, then both parents are going to need to make sure that they have that FSA ID, so both of their tax returns can be imported into the form. Same goes for parents that are married, but they file separately, right? So there's the two situations where both parents will need their FSA ID, unmarried but living together, or married filing separately. Okay, so what about students whose parents are divorced or separated? This actually changed a little bit this year. So in previous years, it was whoever they lived with the most in the past 12 months. Well, with the 24-25 FAFSA, it is who provides the most financial support within the last 12 months. So it is, changed which parent would need to be reporting their information on the FAFSA. If the parents say, the financial support is equal, then just make sure to report the parent that has their greater income and assets. In order to help students with the form and just deciding, which parent needs to be put on the FAFSA, there is a parent wizard tool that's embedded within the FAFSA itself. So the first question it'll ask, are your parents married to each other? If not, then it goes on to ask, I believe it's on the next page, yep. Are the parents married to each other? If they say no, then it asks, do the parents live together? If they say no, then it asks, did one parent provide more financial support than the other in the past 12 months? So with that question, that'll help them determine which parent they would need to be reporting on the FAFSA. And if the parent that provides more financial support is remarried, just making sure that that parent also puts the step parent as well on the FAFSA. So just moving forward, the tool, again, it'll tell the student who to report on their FAFSA. If the student answers yes to the question about that financial support, the student will then see the question about if the parent is remarried. So again, if that parent is remarried, just making sure that they put the step parent on the FAFSA as well. Okay, so what does it look like for a student to invite the parent into the FAFSA? So that is one of the newest, the newer things this year. We have not seen this before for a student to invite a parent in. So what happens is the student puts in the parent's first name, their last name, their date of birth, their social security number, If the parents do not have a social security number, they have to check the box, my parent does not have a social. And then the email address and just confirming the email address. So just making sure all of the information that they put for the parent is what is on the parent's FSA ID, including that email address, right? So just making sure everything connects to that parent's FSA ID. Otherwise, the invite parent can be a little bit finicky if they put, a different email address, or if they, accidentally put like their parent's nickname instead of their name. I just want to give an example. When I was helping a student, she just decided to not put the social security number. She's like, oh, my parents right here. I'm not going to ask her. I'm just going to move forward. She just didn't put it in. And we were trying to figure out, like, why is it not inviting the parent? Like, why did it not work? And I had to go back and I saw that she left the social security number blank. So I was like, oh, that's why. That's why I didn't invite them. So just making sure that the students fill out every single portion here. I can totally understand that it is asking a lot of the student to have all of this information for their parent on the spot. But again, as schools, we can let students and parents know what information is needed for the FAFSA before they come in for a FAFSA workshop. Okay, so moving on to the student demographics section. Okay, so this year, a student is going to be asked about their gender and also their race and ethnicity. Just letting them know that the answers to these questions will not be used in any way, will not be sent to the schools, will not be shared with the schools, right? And it will not impact federal aid or the student's eligibility at all. So if first asked, what is the student's gender? If they do not feel comfortable answering that question, they can also choose prefer not to answer, but just let them know that the question is required. Same goes for race and ethnicity. They can answer it, either by letting them know what race or ethnicity they are, but if they, again, do not feel comfortable answering that, they still do have that prefer not to answer option. Okay, so moving on to student citizenship status. So the student has three options. Either they click US citizen or national, eligible non-citizen, or neither a US citizen nor an eligible non-citizen. So I do just want to go through who is an eligible non-citizen. So with students that are eligible non-citizens, what they're going to need to do is they're going to need their alien registration number first. They're going to be asked for that if they click that option. But if you're, trying to figure out if a student is an eligible non-citizen, the first group is permanent U.S. resident with a permanent resident card. 2 is for a conditional permanent resident with a conditional green card. Next is the holder of an arrival departure record from the Department of Homeland Security with one of the following designations of either refugee, asylum granted, or parolee. A T visa holder, so T1, T2, T3, etc. It is only just in the T range. So, if you see a student with a J visa, for example, I know that that one is a bit more common, just letting them know that that is not included here. Or a Cuban Haitian entrant. Or the holder of a valid certification or eligibility letter from the Department of Health and Human Services showing a designation of human trafficking. So also just want to mention that they added, I don't have the exact wording here on the slide, but for Afghan arrivals, as well as students that are arriving from Ukraine as well, they are now added within the eligible non-citizens. Okay, so the next question asks about the parents' education status, and this is really just to help the schools know if they are, if they have a first-gen student or not. So if the student has the option to either click neither parent attended college, one or both parents attended college, but neither completed, one or both parents completed college, or if they don't know, they can also click the don't know option. Okay, so the next question asks about if their parent was killed in the line of duty. So this is actually specifically for the Iraq and Afghanistan service grant. So it asks the student, was the student's parent or guardian killed in the line of duty while serving on active duty as a member of the U.S. Armed Forces on or after September 11th, or performing official duties as a public safety officer. So this didn't used to be a question on the FAFSA specifically, but now they added it just to make it a little bit easier for them for just being able to track that because it's for a grant specifically. So just being able to track which students actually qualify for that grant. So the student can click yes or no depending on their situation. Then it asks about the student's high school completion status. So with the student's high school, what will the student's high school completion status be at the 24-25 school year? So high school diploma, GED, homeschooled, or none of the above. Okay, and then moving forward, now they have to put in their high school information. So just wanted to make note that FSA has announced that for some colleges and also some high schools, sometimes the names are truncated. So if they can't find their high school, for whatever reason, just making sure that they search by state or city, and then they should be able to find it if their high school name specifically is not popping up. But once they do find their high school, just making sure that they click on it, and also it'll have them like, what do you call it? They have them check it twice, right? Like this is the school that you go to, just make sure for a lot of reasons, but mostly it helps the schools themselves with data tracking when it comes to FAFSA completion, alternative application completion. Okay, so let's move on to dependent student financials. Okay, so with the introduction, it lets the student know that the FAFSA form, helps schools determine their ability to pay for college without financial aid. So in this section, if you receive any federal or state entitlement benefits, and if you had any investments, real estate, or other assets. So it does ask the student still for their financial information. So we know that with the direct data exchange, a lot of this information is going to be imported from their 2022 tax return information once that consent is provided. But it'll only import tax information, so they will see just a few more questions. So those questions is if the student has an IRA rollover into another IRA or qualified plan. It's not asking for the entire amount for the IRA, it's just asking if there is a rollover. Did the student receive any earned income credit? They can say yes, no, or if they are really not sure, they can click I don't know. Then it asks if they received college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS. So for the first year, right, if they're a first year, they're typically not going to have anything to report here, but if they receive anything within the next few years, just making sure that they report that on this question every year. And then it also asks for any foreign earned income exclusion. Okay, so moving forward for student assets. So student assets, the first question it asks annual child support received, and this is asking for the student themselves and their children. So it's not asking for the family, for the parents' children, and is asking for the student, and if the student has children, are they receiving any child support for that? Then it asks about the student's assets. So current total of cash, savings, and checkings accounts. So for this question, this has been the same as the previous year. So just looking at how much cash they have, looking at how much is in the bank, and also if they have any savings accounts and adding that all together just to see, what do they have right now as of today. Then it also asks current net worth of investments, including real estate. So the home in which they live is still excluded, so just so they know. But as you can see on the right-hand side, it includes what is included in an investment. So things like 529 college savings plans. So I do want to mention that this year it is changing a little bit for how 529s are put on the FAFSA. Anna can go over this a little bit more in the parent section, but I do just want to note that this year it's put in the parent section, and they're only going to be reporting the 529 for the student whose FAFSA it is. So let's say they have 529s for every single one of their students, just letting them know that this year they will only need to report the 529 for the student whose FAFSA it is. So that is something that changed this year. Investments also, again, includes things like trust funds, UGMA and UTMA accounts, money market funds, mutual funds, certificates of deposit, stock options, bonds, and all of those other types of things. Those are still included within investments. And then for the last question, ask current net worth of businesses and investment farms. So this year, there is no exclusion with business and investment farms. I did want to make note of that. For students, I feel like most students, this is going to be 0. It'll probably be more important in the parent section. But there used to be an exclusion for businesses that they owned more than 50% of the business and they had 100 or fewer full-time employees. Now there is no longer any exclusions. It is any and all businesses and or investment farms that they have, they're going to need to put the net worth for those businesses or investment farms. So net worth just means current value as of today, businesses, investment farms, minus the debts that are related to those same investments. So just making sure that they know how to calculate that as well. Okay, moving forward to the students selecting their colleges. So with the college search, it looks a little bit different this year in 2 ways. How they search. So you can see it's separated by search by school name or search by school code, made a little bit, I feel like a little bit more clear than it has been in the previous years. And the second thing is it is no longer asking for the student to report what they think their housing plans are going to be for each school. So just letting you know if you're questioning like, hey, what happened to housing plans? That has been removed this year. So as they're searching for schools, I've personally found it a little bit easier to search by school code, just Google. Otherwise, you'll need to put this, they don't let you put it all at one time. You have to put the state first, then the city, and then the name of the university. So you have to do that each time. And let's say you have 20 schools, right? If you're able to search the school code and make that faster, usually it does make it a little bit faster for students because otherwise with that truncating names for the schools as well, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult for students to search by the name. But I believe FSA is also currently working on that as well, just to make sure that those truncated names are no longer going to be affecting the search process for students to select those colleges. Okay, so they can select up to 20 colleges this year, which will help a lot for students that are either, maybe they're indecisive and they're not sure where they want to go, right? Or maybe they're overachievers and they want to apply to every single school that they've ever seen, right? So with 20 colleges, they can put up to 20. So I did get a question from a student saying, hey, what if we're not sure if we want to go to that college? I just, I don't want to send anything out just in case I don't apply. I let them know, put all of the schools that you're interested in, because if you don't apply, they're not going to be doing anything with that student's FAFSA. So just letting them know, it'll be easier for them to just put it all at once. Instead of waiting for their FAFSA to process. And as we know, and I mentioned earlier, that is now going to be delayed until early March, right? So waiting for their FAFSA to process, and then once it's processed, going back in and adding more schools, just having them do it all at once. Okay, so now we're in the student review page. So it reviews it by section. They can open up each tab just to check their answers for everything, make sure that everything looks good. And then with this, it also shows the parent contributor section. So it lets them know if they shared with 1 or 2 contributors and who the invite got sent to. It'll also say the status. So for this student, invite was sent to both parents. You can also request, manage, or remove signatures or contributions from this page in the FAFSA form. As you can see, there's an edit button. Let's say, they invited a parent, but they input something wrong and they just don't want to mess with their FAFSA, right? We know that things have been a little bit glitchy. So they can edit, remove one of the parents they invited, or let's say they didn't know they should only really be inviting one parent in most cases. They tried inviting both, right? Whatever the case may be, they can edit as well. Okay, and then finally onto the student signature page. So it'll give them a quick summary, what is going to happen, by signing this application, using your FSA ID, you certify that, everything that you're reporting is correct, all of that. And at the very end, it's not going to be like an actual signature, much like previous years. It's just a checkbox, and letting them know that they agree to the terms that were outlined. Okay, so once the dependent student section is complete, this is what the page is going to look like. It's going to let them know if the parent has started the form already, or if they haven't, if there, is still signatures that need to be done. Also, the things that they should know. It also lets them know to view their FAFSA submission summary once things process. Again, we know that that has been delayed quite a bit now. Just letting students know to sit tight with that. Also letting them know we strongly encourage and recommend that your parents complete their own section. If that isn't possible, you can also manually provide their information, but you will be eligible for, you will not be eligible for federal student aid, including grants and loans, and that they will need to provide consent and also sign the form in order to be eligible for federal student aid. Okay, so I am going to pass it off to my colleague Anna so that she can go over the rest.
Thank you, Dada. And so I'm going to go ahead and get into dependent student and parents' identity demographics. Now, with this, the first thing is this is going to be just what students who are considered dependent and select that they want to enter their parents' information, their parental information is going to look like. And not to make it sound like entering parental information is going to be optional, but this is just because as Dada went over it, there might be instances where students do not see this information if they are dependent and choose to not provide parental information. The first thing is that the parent is going to receive an email. With this email, they'll see, or the contributor. With the email, they're going to see the contributor's first name. They'll see, I know it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but they'll see that it is asking them to contribute their information to the student's FAFSA. It is letting them know that the form will help the student qualify for the Pell Grant, federal student loans, financial aid, and other school financial aid as well. Now, when they move forward, it'll let them know also like why they were invited, letting them know without their input, student's first name won't be eligible for federal student aid. So it gives them multiple warnings throughout the FAFSA as they're going through it to let them know that if the contributor, the parent, the spouse chooses not to provide that information, that it'll disqualify their student. It would make them not eligible for federal student aid. Once the system will recognize if the parent has already created an FSA ID. So depending on what they choose, if the student puts an email that is attached to a federal student aid ID, they will see the login button as part of the invitation. If the parent does not have an FSA ID, they will get invited to create one. So they will move on to the next screen. If they do have a federal student aid ID, they'll be able to put it on here. If they do not, they can also, if for whatever reason the application takes them to this page, they're able to select create an account. Now with this, it's really important that they have, if the parent already has an existing federal student aid ID, that when the student is inviting the contributor, that they use that same email address that's attached to the federal student aid ID. Once they are able to log in, the parent will get into what is called My Activity within Federal Student Aid. Under this page, they're going to see anything that is of relevance to the parent, the contributor, meaning all things student aid. If the parent was ever a student and they took out their own student loans, they would see that on here. They would see, for example, the example we have on the screen, if the parent qualifies for PSLF, they would see it as well. Borrower defense case, anything that they might have applied for in regards to their financial aid, they would see it on here, along with giving information about the student's FAFSA and being a contributor there. They will then move into the introduction page of being a contributor for it. It'll have some frequently asked questions for them. It'll really emphasize that the student will not be eligible for federal student aid without their information. And then it also lets them know, it makes a point of letting them know that just by contributing their information to the FAFSA for the student, that it does not make them responsible, financially responsible for the student's education. Then from the Federal Student Aid ID, the FSA ID, it'll move on to the parent identity information. For this portion of it, it'll just pull all of the information from FSA ID, so the name, date of birth, the last 4 digits of the social security number, and then the email address and mobile phone number. It does give them the option to update it if they need to from there, but if they don't need to, it'll just auto-populate this information. It'll move on for the parent identity information section. So it'll be the address, the city, the state, the zip code, and then the country. And I do want to backtrack just one slide because I don't think we have this. After, oh no, it is coming. Sorry about that. After they have the parent identity information, it moves on to for the parent to provide consent and approval for their federal tax information to be transferred directly onto the FAFSA. With this, although it is asking for consent, the parent must give consent. If the parent does not give consent to this portion of it, the student will not see a student aid index. It will not be calculated for them. The student will be ineligible for all federal student aid all federal financial aid. And then the parent will be required to report tax information manually. And then anytime are entering information, anytime they're entering that tax information manually, they automatically get selected for verification just because it was entered manually. So just some things to keep in mind, especially when it comes to providing that consent. It is formed and as a question, but it's also that if they were to select not to give consent, then they wouldn't, the student would be ineligible for federal student aid. It moves on to the parent demographics, so it'll ask them about their marital status, college students that are in their household, and legal residence. Now with the marital status, it's asking them if they're married, not separated. This was where I kind of wanted to go back with, I don't think we have a slide on this, but when it's asking for the marital status, if they select that they're married, it also asks them to enter their spouse's information on this page. As of right now, if the spouse has no social security number, if you're working with mixed status families, as of right now, as of today, they're not able to provide to complete the FAFSA. For whatever reason, it glitches on this page. But if you're working with two parents who both have social security numbers and have created an FSA ID, or one has created an FSA ID and the other one hasn't, it'll still go through if they have a social security number. As of right now, it's just for parents who do not have a social security number. It'll ask for the parent's state of legal residence. Again, like Dada mentioned, it is not asking about their immigration status. It is literally asking just for their state of legal residence. Here in the state of Illinois is just to know the student will qualify for the MAP grant, just because that is one of the requirements for dependent students, for their parents to be residents of the state of Illinois. And because this is a federal form, and every state has their own eligibility when it comes to their financial aid programs, this question on the back end helps different states. All right, we're getting into parent financials. With this, they'll see very similar to what the student sees in introduction for parent financials. It is mostly everything the student sees as well, with the exception of a few questions. It'll let them know that the FAFSA form will help the schools determine the student's ability to pay for college without financial aid. And then also it asks them in this section if they receive any federal or state entitlement benefits, and if you have any investments or real estate or other assets. Data went over a lot of those already, but I'm going to provide an emphasis on those questions that are different. With parent federal benefits received, this is asking at any time during 2022 or 2023, did the student or anyone in their family receive benefits from any of the following federal programs? One thing that is nice on here is they have a little message on the top, text help message. Your answers to these questions will not affect the student's eligibility for federal student aid or these federal benefits. On the back end of things, we know that these questions will help the student, the formula. It helps the student, it helps the formula identify if the student will have to report asset information, or the parents will have to report asset information on that. So it's just giving them that message. I know in the past, I've worked with a couple of students who were a little worried about answering this question because they thought it would affect their eligibility, but it does not. If anything, if they participate in these programs, it might help them out or help them be eligible for more aid. With this, again, it'll ask for the year. Every year is going to be different, but it's asking them if they received earned income credit, federal housing assistance, free or reduced price school lunch, Medicaid, refundable credit for coverage under a qualified health plan, supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, supplemental security, SSI, TANF, WIC, or if none of those apply. Now, with this, one of the things that has kind of become a big topic is the free or reduced price school lunch, just because a lot of students, the district might have just like district-wide free lunch, right? Or if during the pandemic they were receiving the EBT card. So technically that would be a yes to this answer, but in order to know if they're able to say yes, not just because their district is making it, it's keeping in mind that this is federal benefits received. So if it's something that was happening at the district level, if it was something that was happening maybe statewide, it has to be that you look at the guidance and guidelines for the federal benefits for these programs and see if the student would meet those benefits. All right, then it'll ask for the parent tax filing status. Did or will the parent file a 2022 joint tax return with their current spouse? If they select yes, again, they'll just move forward with asking the spouse's information. If they select no, that they did not file a joint tax return, it'll ask them to provide the other spouse's information, especially because on this scenario that we're going over, it's a dependent student with married parents, as we were going through the questions. With the parent family size, we get into this will be popular. Oh, let me backtrack for a little bit. With the parent tax filing status, there's only, if you are working with parents that are together, there is only one status where only one parent is going to need that federal student aid ID, and that's going to be with parents who are filing married, filing joint returns. If they're married, if they are filing married but separate returns, both parents will need to log on to their FSA ID or create an FSA ID. If you are working with parents, biological parents who are not married but are living together, technically, because they are not legally married, they shouldn't be filing taxes that are married filing jointly or married filing separate returns, because their legal marital status is not married. Whatever their status for completing the taxes is, they're going to each need an FSA ID. We have seen already in a couple of workshops that we see families who are mixed status families where we might have an individual filing as head of household, even though they're legally married. And in that case, if they are filing head of household, they will need to amend their tax return, but also you will need to FSA IDs for both parents if they are signaling that they are married as their marital status. So this is something that, again, it could be very simple if they are filing that joint return, or if they're single, it would be in that instance that you only need a federal student aid ID for one parent. But in pretty much any other case, the IRS is only able to get that consent from one FSA ID, one social security number, if that other parent is not included on the taxes from the initial parent, that other parent is pretty much going to need their own FSA ID in order for their tax information to be pooled. With parent family size, this was one of the updates and changes that we had. This is going to be populated automatically based on what is on the taxes. So however, parents have the option to edit this question if taxes no longer reflect what is true as of today. Now, one of the questions that we often get asked that has to do with students who have divorced parents and how they report or whose information they report for purposes of the FAFSA. Oftentimes we get asked, what if mom is providing all financial support, but dad is claiming the student on their taxes? In that case, it does not matter. The mom is the one whose information would go on the FAFSA. So if this question, because it's tying it back to what's reported on the taxes, don't get caught up in it. The parent's information that gets reported on here, it has nothing to do with who claims the student on their taxes. This is just, especially if, same scenario, mom provides financial support for the student, most of it, and then dad claims the student on their taxes. If we get to this question and we're putting mom's information, if the family size, if the student is not reflected as part of the family size because they're on dad's taxes, this is where you get to make those updates. Then it'll ask for the number of students who are in college from the parent's household size. So how many people in the parent's family will be in college between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. Do not include the parent. The parent never gets included as part of the number of students who are in college as part of the household. One thing that also has been an update from recent years is that this year specifically, if you are aware or familiar with the formulas or overall how the student aid index and Pell Grant gets calculated, in the past they used to take into account the number of students in college. That is no longer going to be the case. No longer will that count against or in favor of the student when it's calculating their student aid index or Pell eligibility. We get into parent 2022 tax return information. So it is asking them to refer back to their parents' tax return for 2022. And it's asking them these questions. These are going to be if they provided consent to have the DDX transfer their information from the IRS onto the FAFSA. These are going to be the only questions that they will have to look through their taxes to be able to answer them. So the first one is, did the parent receive the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC? Yes, no, don't know. Amount of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS. This one is an optional question. And then it gets into the foreign earned income exclusions. Again, this is looking back into their tax information. If it's not on there, more than likely it does not have to be reported because it wouldn't it wouldn't apply to that parent. Then we get into parent assets. The first question that you see on here, annual child support receipt, this is one of the questions that the student does not see. This was a little bit of an update because before financial questions used to be replicate exactly what was on the student section onto the parent section with the exception of one question. But now this is one of the questions that is a little bit different, and this is also the section where we're reporting as of today. Before this, everything that we are looking for on our taxes is going to be from 2022. With this, anything that we look forward is going to be as of today. So for annual child support received, this is enter total amount received in child support for the last completed calendar year. So this is not reporting prior data. This is reporting the past calendar year. Any child support received. It's not asking about child support paid. It's only asking about child support received. Then it gets into the parent's assets, the current total of cash, savings, and checkings account. Don't include student financial aid. This is just what the parent has. Again, just cash, savings, or checkings account. Then it gets into the current net worth of businesses and investment firms. As Dada went over, there has been an update to this one too as to what gets included and what gets excluded from it. Before, it used to be that if you had a certain number of employees and owned a percentage of the business, that you would get to exclude it from here. But now all of it gets included as an investment. Sorry about that. So sorry about that. So with that, we get into the current net worth of investments, including real estate. And then that is also something that the home in which the student lives at will get excluded. It wouldn't get counted as real estate. With the other parent information, this is something that you will see a lot earlier on than when we're providing the other information, but you would be able to see that. It's again asking the first name, last name, the date of birth, the social security number. It does give them the option to have a box that says that the parent does not have a social security number. But again, as of recently, if you are checking on federal student aid, their website as to what issues they're working on for the FAFSA. This is one of the things that is open. If one of the parent doesn't have a social security number, as of right now, there is no option for them to submit a FAFSA. So just check back there regularly because it is something that ideally they'd be able to do, but I know I have worked with a lot of students and a couple of my colleagues have as well, where they don't see that information on this part. The parent will get to review their information. It's not letting them make changes on here. They would have to go back into the section, but they are able to review all of the information. And then they'll get into the parent signature and submission. I'm not sure if I caught it when Dada went over it, but one of the things that students also have been struggling with is providing that signature. So they have been selecting the drop-down menu where it says signature, and we have the green check marks, and then we get into the signature portion of it. With this signature portion, it is not that you do the drop-down menu and you're able to sign it from there. You have to scroll to the bottom of this page, and then it'll give you the option to provide that signature, and then you'll come back and submit it from there. It'll give them their sign and complete their section information. It'll give them as the option to, if you can see on your screen at the bottom of it, it's the checkbox where they're able to check it and say like they're signing it, electronically signing it. And then they'll be able to go ahead and continue. They'll get a FAFSA confirmation page with this. It'll let them know that the student is going to receive an email with their student aid index and Pell calculation. Now, with this, is not something that the parent's going to receive. This is something that the student receives directly. Again, the parent does not receive this information at all. they'll be able to, if the parent needs to go back in, make any updates, they would just go into federalstudentaid.gov. They'll enter their FSA ID. It'll give them the status of their student's FAFSA as well. And for the student, that I already mentioned it, but since FAFSAs are not going to be processed until late February, maybe possibly early March, students are not able to make any corrections on here, but they are able to view some of their status, even though it's not going to be processed. But they're able to see if they send an invite to the parent or a contributor. They'll be able to see whether they provided that invite to the parent. They'll be able to see if they need to if the parent hasn't completed it, if they want to change any information about the parent, the contributor, if they need to change the email, if they need to make updates to any of their information. One of the things that we recently have heard about as well is that although, the student might have signed their section and submitted it, and then the parent goes through, signs their section, submits it, for some odd reason, signatures have been getting kicked out. So it might seem or look like the student has not signed the FAFSA. Again, as of right now, that would be something that, because it has already been submitted, that would be something that they would have to come back in and make a correction or be able to sign it. But because the FAFSAs are not being processed, they're not able to do that right now. So if you are working with students and you are seeing that they need the student's signature, just be aware that it might be that they're working on getting that glitch fixed. Now, one of the new items that we have is the FAFSA Communication Toolkit. This is going to be a resource that guides a resource guide to assist practitioners with communicating with families and their best practices regarding the changes to this year's financial aid application. If you are working with high school students whose parents might have never completed a FAFSA or they don't have older siblings, again, this is something that they're going to be seeing for the first time, but so it might not affect them as much to see it. But if you are working with a parent or a student who completed a FAFSA in the past, this is something that it's going to be very unfamiliar to them. It'll have examples to connect with stakeholders, emails to family in English and Spanish, email to volunteers, robocalls, script in English and Spanish, flyers, social media posts in English and Spanish. So it just has overall just a range of templates as to like what emails should be sent. With the financial aid application completion initiative, this is something that because we are also not receiving that information from FAFSA, if you are familiar with it, the Financial Aid Application Completion Initiative, we track the FAFSA alternative application and opt-out waiver completion forms through the Gift Assistance Program. With GAP Access, this is something that in the past, as soon as the FAFSA opened up and as soon as we received information from the FAFSA and we received information from ISB on for public schools as to their rosters, we'd be able to give updates as what the completion is. Unfortunately, this year, we are waiting to hear more or get more information from the Department of Education with the FAFSAs just because they are not processing them. So, but this is something that if you are not familiar with, some of the items that you can do is become familiar with it as of right now. If you work at a high school, this is something only available to high schools. If you not to community-based organizations, get familiar with it, log in. This is going to be a great time for you. If you don't have access to it, the only way to get access to it is to have your principal give you access. Great time to do that. Great time to troubleshoot anything that you may need to get in here, become familiar with it, and then you're still able to see other like past years information as well. We also have the First Generation Scholar Network. This is going to be one of our newer services for students, specifically for those who are going to be first generation scholars. Students can can click the Join Now button. It's on our student portal. They would get additional assistance. They're able to connect with a first generation scholar network mentor. They would be able, if there is first generation supports in their campus, they would be able to get access to that. And then if there's any events that are specifically for first generation students, you'd be able to get notified about that as well. So this is one of the newer services, and it's available through our student portal. And then for everyone who is a professional and is supporting first generation students, we do have our first Gen Symposium coming up on Monday, March 11th. This is our first ISAC hosted Gen Symposium. This is going to be in person at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. If you were a professional who was a first generation student, we want to hear from you. So scan the QR code, and we do have the call for proposals open right now. If you are a professional who just very closely works with first generation students, even if you're not a first generation student yourself, if you work closely with supporting first generation student, please, if you have a program that you think it's really helping students, if you have noticed a pattern with like what are some of the issues that they are facing, what are some of the additional supports that they need, please make sure to if you're able to attend and submit a proposal, that you scan the QR code or email us for more information. Now I am going to open this up. We are providing CEs and PD requests. For these, they do have to be, the evaluation does have to be submitted by the 7th of February. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up on the chat. I'm gonna share the link for that one. And again, you have to complete the evaluation in order for you to receive PD hours or CE credits. Just give me 1 second. Okay, someone opened it up for me, I think. So with this, again, just complete it and have it ready by that time. So I'll put it on the chat. If you have any questions, this is going to be the end of the webinar, but I'll stick around if you all have any questions. Or even if it's about the evaluation form. Well, thank you so much, and you all have a great day.